Hey, welcome back to another video. I want to talk about a comment that I received in one of my latest videos. And I think the person hit some really serious points, and I wanted to, it works as a good way to illustrate some of the problems that we have to go through this. So if I click the right buttons, hopefully this will all work. But all right. So this comes from MB that says, thanks, Duane, for your videos. It was helpful in regards to the video I made the other day. I have regularly followed you for 2 years, and you are my favorite go-to YouTuber on this topic for support. I found you just as I exited my relationship with 3 kids and 1 on the way. I was so brainwashed that I actually thought the kids were better off without me and left them with him. The situation did not last long once I was helped back to my senses. Okay, so I want to pause there for a second. And basically, that is really common, right? I mean, the psychological warfare, effectively, that we go through when we're going through this wears us down so much that we start to believe the crap that the ex is saying. We rationalize all that, and we begin to think that we are just a pathetic human being and that everyone would be better off without us. Now, that is by design. The narcissist is trying to crush your spirit. In this particular situation, it's a guy, but I mean, they all follow the same trait. So a narcissistic woman or narcissistic woman who is your wife or soon to be ex-wife, or a narcissistic man who is soon to be your ex-husband, they tend to follow the exact same patterns, and crushing your self-worth is a huge part of that. I mean, it's kind of their go-to thing. And it's not uncommon for people to exit these relationships feeling like they're completely worthless pieces of garbage, and that it's just sad that actually it's funny, not funny, but ironic, because I absolutely remember thinking these same things. Thinking that I was just a horrible person that was of negative influence on everybody, and everyone would just be better off if I wasn't around. Now, thank God, when I finally got to the point where I left, I had been working on myself. Not that I understood narcissism and personality disorders, but I was just really working to try to make my life better, to be more positive, and to try to get to, I guess, the space I wanted to be, right? So when the relationship fell apart, I felt that I deserved an opportunity for happiness. I didn't know if I could find it. I didn't know if it was going to happen. And it was a huge leap of faith that I was going to leave the only thing that was good in my life, thinking the relationship and the family. And it was, to me, I mean, literally it was a roll of the dice that this is either going to help me have a better life, or it is going to destroy everything to the point that there's zero recovery and I will never be able to overcome it. And I knew fundamentally that something was wrong, and I got to that point. Anyways, I don't want to necessarily turn this into a story of me. Let me pull this back up. My point is that I absolutely can relate to what this person is saying and being in that mind space. So hopefully I can figure out where I was. So I was lucky I saw your video and was able to recognize the situation and not make a lot of the mistakes that you forewarned about. Thanks. Okay, again, that's a really huge one on this, because whenever you're going through this mode, you're being attacked, your self-worth is in the toilet, your whole world is falling apart. It is so critical that you don't make mistakes that make it worse. That's why I talk about it so much, because it is so, it's such a risk, and it's so easy to fall into that, because there's a laundry list of decisions you can make that are bad. Some of them you can overcome. They'll make your situation more complicated. That's for sure. That's a given. But it doesn't necessarily. Bottom line is, not making those mistakes is the best course of action. If you can recognize what's going on, adjust your posture, so to speak, so that you don't make those mistakes. You will be much better off. Now, for the people who are watching this who have made mistakes, you can, for the most part, depending on how bad they were, overcome them. If you get into a situation where you have a permanent restraining order, you've been slapped with domestic violence or some other issue that has stuck because you've made mistakes and then reinforced it, so now the court agrees with it, it's still, you can still have some potential for success through that, but obviously every mistake you make is going to make it a little bit harder. So let me continue on. This has put me in a good place. Family courts, I would describe the ex as a malignant narcissist. We are going through the family courts in the UK. He has seen the kids very little for the last 2 years due to court order. Now let me just pause for there. Okay, so and this goes both ways, right? What I will say is sometimes your narcissistic ex will expose themselves, not expose them, but make some mistakes that give you some victories in court. Now potentially, and I'm, for the person who wrote this, I'm not questioning their story, but there's also the flip side to that where, like what I was just talking about, if you make mistakes, you can end up in that situation, right? So it's like you have to be very cautious that you don't take the bait, you don't make mistakes, and you don't end up in a situation, hold on, I'm moving my phone, where the family court hasn't, a story's been said about you, and then you reinforce it. Because if you do that, you are in this type of situation. Now, what I will say on this is if you end up in that and they start telling you that you have to jump through extra hoops, jump through those hoops. If they say, hey, you've messed up, so you're going to have supervised visitation, well, do the supervised visitation. Suck it up. Don't, because if you turn around and go, well, I'm not going to do that, then you've effectively stopped fighting, right? Now, the flip side to this, if you're lucky and your malignant narcissistic ex makes a bunch of errors and the court ends up supporting you, and this does happen with men and women, right? I mean, there are men who have gotten custody because their female narcissistic toxic ex has done so much stuff that the courts have finally said, okay, we're sick of this, you bad, you not as bad, and adjust custody appropriately. So just be, and hopefully I said that okay, but anyways, my point is, you gotta just methodically go through this. Remember that it's a war for your overall goal and what you're trying to accomplish, and don't just focus on the battles. Sometimes you're gonna have setbacks. I don't know how many times I've talked to people where they have a setback in court, or it appears like it's a setback in court, but realistically, when you look at it, it's like, well, okay, that's not that bad. If you look at the bigger picture, you're actually still winning. There's a lot of people I've talked to about that. And it's very common for us, especially when we're still emotionally wrapped in all this, that anytime we don't have a crushing victory against the ex, it feels like a loss, right? And that's a really dangerous situation to get in, because you position to get yourself into, because then you start to lose sight of the bigger picture of what's actually going on and what you have accomplished and how things are actually going. And to be perfectly honest, I fell into that. There were so many things where I can look back on now where I would talk to people and it was a nuanced victory, but I didn't see it, right? It was so in the grand scheme of all the pain and all the hurt and everything that was going on, it just didn't feel like a victory. It felt hollow. So that's it. Let me get back into this. So I find my eldest now also lies about me to people to gain sympathy and get me to buy her things. I have not yet come to terms with the general consensus that children should have limited contact with their narcissistic ex, and I'm still guilt-ridden that the children do not see their dad. Okay, so here's the other thing with this, and I was just talking to a coaching client the other day. It's amazing how people who are targets of this struggle with their own guilt and empathy towards the other person in these situations. It's so common for somebody who's been with a narcissistic person who really doesn't give a crap about them to feel guilty about how the relationship is affected with the other parent. that you don't want it to be this way. You want it to be different. And it's really common. I mean, here's the deal. We all have to wake up and recognize the reality of what we're in. And it's really tough because 90% of the time, I would say, this goes against our nature, right? It is absolutely contrary to the way we normally interact with people, the way we want to interact with people, the way we would expect ourselves to behave. And it makes it really tough. Now, I'm not saying that that's, all codependent type behavior, but what happens is you have this naive view of the world. You want it to be a certain way. You absolutely want it to be the certain way with the other parent of your kids, and it makes it really tough to see reality. It is critically important that we all take a step back, recognize the person that we're dealing with, recognize the reality of it, and accept it. And with that, yes, we can be sad about it, like this person is saying, but it's kind of counterproductive because it can detract from you seeing that reality, and it can also lead to making mistakes and trusting the person, thinking, because what'll happen is typically they'll start acting differently. You'll be like, oh, thank God, this stuff is finally over. They finally come to their senses and things will get better. Guys, here's the sad reality of this. A toxic, narcissistic person that has a strong potential for a personality disorder, undiagnosed, they don't change. They can act a part. They can turn around one day and pretend like they're different, but they're not. And as soon as, it's like the analogy of, the scorpion and the dog, or the rattlesnake and the, dog or whatever. And it's like, they need to get across the river, and, it's like, hey, the venomous creature is like, hey, well, let's team together and we'll ride across. And the other person's like, or the other creature is like, well, you're going to bite me. You're going to kill me. And then we'll both die. No. Why would I do that? Why would I kill why would I kill both of us? And they start, it's like, okay, good point. And starts going across because the logic makes sense. And bam, halfway, it's like, oh my God, why did you bite me? And now we're both going to die. And it's like, well, that's my nature. You have to recognize and I don't know, hopefully that makes sense. And hopefully I told that story correctly. But the reality is you have to understand, or you have to recognize what you're dealing with and who they are, and don't lose sight of that. So yeah, I mean, I understand feeling guilty. I felt the same thing. Just be careful of it because it can basically spiral you down. So they continue on to say, I myself have successfully gone no contact for about 2 years, so soon as I got my kids back. And no contact, if you can do it, is super important. This particular person has the benefit that there's a court order that's limiting that, and that's the best case scenario in any of this, is if we have a situation where the narcissistic, toxic person is not in our lives and not in our kids' lives. The problem is when they're not in the kids' lives, the kids are going to be affected by it because they're going to feel like they're abandoned. They're going to feel abandoned by the other parent, or they're going to feel like, oh my God, the other parent is a total monster. I'm part of that. So, it's going to cause conflict with them. If you're in that situation, like for this person, I don't remember if they said how old their kids are. You probably really need to make sure that your kids get therapy to help them through that, because otherwise this cycle will just repeat. Damaged children continue and basically do the same thing. So it makes it a lot harder, right? I mean, you're almost even a little bit better off for the kids' sake if the other parent's involved enough to at least they don't feel like they've been rejected by the other parent. I felt that. I mean, I can think about that right now. I mean, I used to feel that way about my own father, that he was completely rejecting me. Now, I was being manipulated about it, and his actions were basically just self-preservation on his own right. I didn't understand it at the time, but it hurt. It really bothered me, and it primed me for getting with my ex, because whenever the love bombing stage happened and it was like, oh my God, this person really cares about me. We're like the perfect match. I can't let them get away. I mean, I just thinking about it now, it's like, what a I was such an idiot. 19 years old, you know, just crushed by horrible family life. Found this person that seemed to be the I don't know, the unicorn or whatever, and ignored all the red flags. I'm sorry, ignored all the red flags. And the really sad part is whenever because people like this, they can't maintain the facade, right? So it breaks down. So it starts breaking down quick. And in my mind, I'm like, oh crap. Well, this is no different than what I grew up with. So, but we still love each other. So, I mean, I would make excuses and I ignored it. I had I had no boundaries. I absolutely had no healthy boundaries. And as a result, and I think most of us get ourselves in that position where we do that. So the other thing I want to mention is where they talk about my eldest now also lies about me to other people to gain sympathy. That's a really bad sign. That's horrible. And it's going to be, unfortunately, it's trained behavior, right? They're probably seeing the other person. They've probably seen that, hey, if I act like the victim, I get sympathy and people do things for me, or they go easy on me. I can make my mom feel guilty and then get things I want. You got to try to nip that one in the bud and it's hard. It's not easy. This isn't, see, here's the other problem with this. And we have decisions when we're going through this to where we can make easy decisions for the short term, but it makes things a hell of a lot harder later. Or you make this hard decisions now, which will make things a lot easier later, maybe. And it's a tough one. And I can't, you can't pick everything to fight. I will say that, like in my situation, there were so many problems that I had to pick and choose what I was going to, hold the ground on with my kids, because I knew if I went too far, I would push them away and, lose them completely. So it was a very weird balancing act. Time is the ultimate teller of how we're going to do on this. But what I would recommend anyone going through this is really take, when something's going on, take a pause. Think about the long-term effects of the decision and then try to, it's like, okay, well, where can I set boundaries with my children that will, have some, not explode the whole situation, but start to make change. You can do it. It's just really tough. And and depending on the age of the kids, this person's saying it's an eldest kid, so I don't know how old that is. It's going to be really hard. Now, sometimes some of this crap is childhood development type stuff. So sometimes this stuff happens. Meaning it may not just be because of the influence of the ex, but it's a bad sign. I'll give you that. So I feel for the person who's going through this. So the last thing is just, on it, I have another channel that I've made just kind of more focused on camping and stuff. And it's a little bit more of a completely different message, right? Just a positive, fun type thing. So if you're interested in that, leave a comment down below and I'll share the link with you. And that is, wrong button. And that is what I wanted to hit on this. All this stuff is really difficult. It's none of it's easy. And there's levels, there's I guess levels or phases that you end up going through on this. And this particular person really hit a lot of them in that comment. The main thing is that I don't want you to leave this thinking, oh my God, this is just one big crap sandwich that never gets better. That's not necessarily true. If our kids decide to go down the dark path, there's not much we can do about it, but we can do everything we can, right? And then at the end of the day, you just say, okay, I've tried everything. I've done everything that I knew to do. I tried to learn as much as I could. I've tried to be the best person, the best parent, not friend, best parent to my kids. I've done the best. Even if you later realize, oh crap, I made all these mistakes. But as long as you're trying at the time, you're trying to do the best you can, you can't beat yourself up on it. I would have loved to have had this type of channel 9 years ago that I could have hit the ground running, starting on this, not making any mistakes. I mean, that would have been tremendous. But the reality is I didn't know. I was trying to learn. I was trying to find out. I was trying to adjust. I mean, this is the whole reason I made this channel, is because I know I made a ton of mistakes. I know how hard this was for me. I know how hopeless this was for me. And I'm trying to give back to help somebody else going through this, so they don't make those same mistakes, that they don't burn, 4 to 6 years. Yeah, 4 to 6 years making these mistakes. Because had I known what I know today back then, which I know is normal, right? I mean, you normally say that, but there are people on the channel who are early on this, finding this out, like even this person, right? I mean, found this stuff early on, was able to make adjustments and undo, or not make any more mistakes, and turn things back around. So on that, I appreciate the comment. I thought it was a great discussion topic. I'm curious to see what you think. I mean, what do you think about all this? Does this make sense to you? I mean, do you agree with what I'm saying? Do you think that maybe I'm wrong? What's your way forward? If you know somebody who could use this, if it would help them, please share it with them. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe, hit the bell notification so YouTube tells you about everything. And if you want to support what I do here, you can scroll down and click the join button and become a channel member. And yeah, on that, we'll chat with you in the next video. Take care.